Simcha, I need you to unlock your phone. I lost it. Good evening. Welcome. Thanks so much for joining, and for all of you at home, thanks for tuning in. I know a lot of people are unfortunately feeling a little under the weather. We feel you in spirit. Everyone, please rise. We're going to say the Rebbe's Kapitel. It should be on the screen. I'll wait until it comes on. Shir Hamalais El Adonai B'Tarasa Li Karasi V'Yaneni Adonai Hatzila Nafshi Misfas Shakar Milashon Rumia Ma Yitain Lach Ma Yasif Lach Lashon Rumia Chite Gibar Shanunim Im Gachale Resamim Ayai Li Ki Garti Mishach Shachanti Im Ahale Kedar Rabba Shachna La Nafshi Im Saine Shalom Ani Shalom B'Chi Adaber Hema La Milchama. Thank you. So I was joking with M.U.S.T that I wrote out my notes, even though I usually don't like using notes, but I wrote out notes because I wanted to keep the message short and brief because we have some incredible speakers here today. And I printed them out because as I'm talking about technology, I can't be looking at my phone. But in all the hustle and bustle, I left my notes at home. So I will be using my phone as I'm talking about the dangers of technology. Okay. When Chanel originally called me last year, they were putting together a promotional video to introduce M.U.S.T for the inaugural event in Crown Heights, and she asked me to come and be a part of it. And even though I hate saying no to Chanel because she does so much, how do I have the chutzpah to say no? I had to politely decline because when I do talk about a topic, it is usually something I'm passionate about, something I feel knowledgeable about, that I have a voice and an opinion that's coherent and meaningful and relevant. And when it comes to technology, I definitely do not. I am a digital dinosaur. I can never figure out how anything works, especially apps and social media. And by the time I do figure it out, there's something new out there. And so when it comes to making guidelines for my family, when I figured things out for my now 21-year-old, 10 years later, it doesn't work for the 10-year-olds. It's not a new world. It's a completely different universe that we're dealing with. But something happened this year when we received the M.U.S.T packs on the WhatsApp, on the class WhatsApps, that made me really rethink about if I have something to add to the conversation. The class packs were sent out, and before I typed in agree, I actually sat with each child from each class to go over what was going to be expected from them that the class had agreed on. And I was sitting with one of my older kids, and you know that it definitely gets way more complicated when your kids are older. And as we were going through it, it wasn't a complicated pack, but as we were going through it, I kind of saw him like rolling his eyes, and he was like, okay, yeah, you want me to say yeah? I'll say yeah. And I was like, no, this is real. Like, this is not just sign on the dotted line and move on and, you know, in one ear and out the other. And he said, yeah, Ma, but I know that there are some kids in my class who, if they are signing on the dotted line, that's what it means to them. And I said, really? Like, when I first heard about this program, what struck me as so authentic to me was like, let's meet you where you're at. Let's make something that works for the whole class. So these thoughts were like going on in my head, and it was dinner, homework time. I put my phone away because try to focus on the moment. And when I did come back to my phone, I noticed that the class ambassador had written on the chat, okay, so a couple of mothers reached out to me, and they went through the pact, and they realized that a few things are not going to work for them. And so we're going to amend this pact so that when everybody says that they agree, then it's something real that they are really trying to follow through on. And when that happened, that simple WhatsApp text really reverberated with me, really resonated. I was like, you know what? This is what we need. Until now, we had the generals in the war rooms, the principals and the administrators, sending out edicts and guidelines and telling us, the foot soldiers in the trenches, because some days when you're having an argument with your kid about technology, it does feel like a full-blown out war. We're in the trenches. We're getting the work done. You have to meet me where I'm at. You have to meet where my family's at. You can't train me for a marathon at mile number 17 if I'm at mile number 3. And if you make it real, and if you make it authentic, and it's not just in theory, this would be great if we all did this, then it's something that we can actually really bring real change to our community and real, true guidelines for our children. And so when Hanel called me now, even though I have a very good excuse for not being here tonight, I'm flying out very early tomorrow morning to Chicago to give 2 speeches, so I should be working on those. But I was like, I have to get behind this because this is true, this is real, this is authentic, this is effective. I saw it. I saw a group of people having a real, open, honest, authentic dialogue on the chat without judgment. And so, that being said, turn your attention to the screen. We have a short video of the Rebbe. The Rebbe talks about, always, whenever the Rebbe spoke about chinuch, it was always about how to make the message meaningful and real. How can we be authentic role models for our children in the way that we act in relation to technology?
In mitzvahs und meisim tevim ist da eiche der Inyan shazman gromo. Als alle meisim seine daket meisim tevim in der Ruf gufe da de dig dimo. Beloshna medine priority zu die Sachen, wo sie seinen azman gromo, wo die Zeit fordert, aber man soll das nicht ablegen auf morgen, nicht ablegen auf viel in demselben Tag auf später, über Kondeston gleich alles hat. Wo das eine von den Sachen kommt, in der Linie nach Chinuch, wie gerät mehrere Mal, der Jünger dort was wächst, der Jünger bepasst und der Jünger in Jedies, ist der steht nicht und wart. Und jeder Rege, was wächst, fordert als wir sollen geben, dem Chinuch in der Rege, der soll wissen sein, was sich aufzufinden, in der Rege soll Achrise, und neben geht es ihm nicht, wird verloren, und der Chinuch, was hat ihm gedacht, mit Malle sein in dem Rege, wo man mit dem Mechaniker sein morgen und übermorgen, in Daische Jafkia Ersatzmei, wir sollen geben dem Chinuch, was wir dürfen geben, in dem Tag Scheliachrise. Und es bleibt nicht in Zeit, dass wir Malle sein, das, was man gedacht, das nutzen die Zeit, von einem Tag früher, auf ein Mechaniker sein. Der Mechaniker verlangt das nicht, ich lege das hat Teim, aber wie bald verlangt es nicht. Ist das Simen, als darf das nicht, das ist Punkt verkehrt. Verlangt nicht, aber wir sollen Mechaniker sein, und das ist der Hechlich Achigomur, als fällt im Ganzen der Chinuch. Atke de Kach ist nicht Mechaniker, als fehlt gar nicht, als fällt Chinuch ador. In Chinuch Gufo ist da verschiedene Leifane, zum allen Menschen beweisen ein lebendiges Beispiel, wo das ist der beste Weg, einzuwirken auf den Zweiten, bis sieht, als Rum und befragt der Mechanik, fühlt sich in dem Eifen, was verlangt, als soll sich fühlen. Der Adrabe, wie mir selber Teva oder wie der Rebischter hat beschaffen, an Menschen, ich gehe zu Peil sein, beim Mechunach, a bestimmte Moos von Meisim Tevim, darf der Mechaner beweisen ein Beispiel von einer Sache mehr, worin der Mechunach tragbar sich, als kann nicht sein Punkt im Ganzen, wie der Mechaniker, bescheid der Mechaniker ist selten von ihm, und ist ein Mechaniker und nicht das Wetter, nicht wegen einem Mechunach und Betriebsachinach. Wo der von verstandig hat zu Peil sein, meist im Tevin Beschleimus und beim Mechunach, darf sein der lebendige Beispiel von Mechanik, kam upon im Kochen, wo das ich Koromur durch die erste Sache in Chino beweisen ein lebendigen Beispiel. Danach darf man mit ihm reden und Mechanik sein Bedieber in der Neffen von Dvorim ha-Yetzim in ha-Leiv, wo demult ha-Yetzim in ha-Leiv, demult nichnosim el ha-Lev, wo Perlim Piulosom, wie gebracht in Sefer ha-Yosher le-Rabbeinu Tam, und bekamen mit Kemis. Und der Riker, wie mir sagt, was bemeisse Ra, bemeisse Bepeir.
I'd like to call up Gila Schechter. She runs the NAST Foundation and is one of the founders of the Crown Heights chapter of M.U.S.T.
Thank you. Wow, what a video. Ashreinu matayv chalkeinu, that we have a Rebbe that continues to guide us and seems to have foreseen what we are dealing with today. Good evening, everybody. For the past 8 years, I have had the honor and privilege of managing the Nash Foundation on behalf of Chaim Tzvi Nash. The foundation has distributed millions of dollars annually to the Crown Heights community. Many families, organizations, and institutions have benefited from these funds. Over the years, and most recently, to a greater extent, we have noticed a worrying and alarming trend. We have been allocating more and more funds towards emergency situations for at-risk children. We were surprised about the dramatic change. When we took a closer look to identify the root cause, we realized that major funds were being allocated towards therapeutic treatment for children and, quite frankly, suicide prevention in young adults. Instead of funding community growth and assisting new organizations, our funds are now being expended for crisis prevention. What was revealing to us was that while trauma of growing up in unfortunate circumstances necessitating therapeutic intervention was not increasing, yet a major shift was happening. We were now servicing families that had no identifiable or obvious cause or core reason for requiring therapy. Trauma, we understand. Unfortunate circumstances, we understand. But this alarming increase was happening to seemingly normal families. Why? Why was this happening in our community to children with a parent-stable upbringing, to many parents in the same social circles as those sitting here today? So we started to research and consult with these mothers, fathers, and even some of the teens themselves. The one unifying factor that we were able to point to was not trauma or unfortunate circumstances, but rather the growing usage of technology and social media amongst the children and teens. This usage was having a dramatic impact on their emotional and social development. There might be other causes that contribute, but this was the one controllable source that kept coming up time and time again. This startling conclusion, along with constant emerging empirical data on the dangers of technology and social media usage amongst our children, led us as a foundation to announce this vital call to action. We are proud to be a sponsor of this M.U.S.T campaign. A fire is burning in our community. The fire is real and tangible and continues to rage throughout our communities. We are now stepping up to try to do something about it. We cannot solve all the problems, but let me use an analogy. One day, a man was walking along the beach when he noticed a boy picking up a starfish and gently throwing it back into the ocean. Approaching the boy, he asked, "What are you doing?" The youth replied, "Throwing starfish back into the ocean. The surf is up and the tide is slowly going down. If they remain on the sand, they will die." "Son," the man said, "don't you realize that there are miles upon miles of beach and hundreds of starfish? You can't make a difference." The boy looked up to the man and replied as he bent down to pick up another starfish and throw it back into the ocean, "For this starfish, I am making a life and death difference." There are thousands of homes with children immersed in their devices, but I can guarantee you that for each mother whose eyes we open to the emerging dangers, To each home that can stall their technology usage, even for a month or even for a year, to that mother, we are making a life-changing difference. Let me end with a call to action. If you want to get involved in a small way, help by signing that pact and supporting your child's class ambassador. Or, if you would like to get involved in a larger way, please, contact us at must-ch.org and become an ambassador yourself. Thank you.
These technology products were not designed by child psychologists who are trying to protect and nurture children.
They give their children a device at maybe 3 or 4, and all of a sudden that's all they want. And they don't want to play with other toys. They don't want to have any interest in other activities. They just want to be in front of their screen.
We also know that digital technology already disrupts things that are important for healthy development. So sleep, one-on-one interactions that are face-to-face, learning how to focus on one's schoolwork, physical activity.
We used to have these protections. We would say, you can't advertise to these age children in these ways. But then you take YouTube for Kids and it gobbles up that entire portion of the attention economy, and now all kids are exposed to YouTube for Kids. And all those protections and all those regulations are gone.
According to the Wall Street Journal, internal research at companies like Facebook found the negative effects of social media are felt more among young people, specifically teenage girls.
The number of teenage girls out of 100,000 in this country who are admitted to a hospital every year because they cut themselves or otherwise harm themselves, that number was pretty stable until around 2010, 2011, and then it begins going way up.
What I'm going to call an epidemic of anxiety. I'm seeing 11-year-olds with anorexia. I'm seeing 13-year-olds not going to school. And these are kids from beautiful families. And I'm seeing 15-year-olds who are frankly suicidal.
I was struggling with severe depression and anxiety.
These services are killing people and causing people to kill themselves.
If you know that Instagram and Twitter and Facebook are causing you all this pain, why do you keep going back to it then?
It's hard to detach and realize that it's a really negative part of your life.
Many of us spend more time on social media than we probably should, but for some users, sites like Facebook, Twitter, and yes, Instagram can become a troubling obsession, causing them to lose touch with reality.
So you can actually see a part of the brain light up when you're feeling good.
Yes, in the scanner.
Based on her data and the results from other studies, Dr. Baggett is among scientists who believe screen time stimulates the release of the brain chemical dopamine, which has a pivotal role in cravings and desire.
As humans, we've almost lost control.
Social media is a drug. I mean, we have a basic biological imperative to connect with other people.
I use my phone for everything.
Instagram and Snapchat.
My mom, sometimes she wants me to go outside and get some fresh air.
They're taking away my chargers. They say that I'm gonna go crazy because I spend too much time on my phone.
This is a real change in a generation. And remember, for every one of these, for every hospital admission, there's a family that is traumatized and horrified. My God, what is happening to our kids?
Why are those other mothers so silly to give their kids devices? Because of them, now I have to do it. And then I said, whoa, 1 second. Maybe they also don't want to give their kids devices, but they're doing it because everybody else is doing it. At which point I said, why don't we all get together and decide together that we don't want our kids to have devices?
I don't know any parent who says, yeah, I really want my kids to be growing up feeling manipulated by tech designers, manipulating their attention, making it impossible to do their homework, making them compare themselves to unrealistic standards of beauty. No one wants that. No one does.
You really have the power right now to change the status quo. It is a success if you hold it off by 1 year. Everything is a success. Don't give up.
Wow, that video is powerful. Rabbi Dr. Shigalov has extensive experience in the mental health field, treating adolescents, adults, families, specifically in regards to mental illness and addictions, internet, sexual. It is my honor to invite him up here to share with us his professional expertise and shed some light and clarity with us.
A little intimidating. I am honored and delighted to be here tonight for a few reasons. First of all, this is a passion for me. This is something which I myself have struggled with in the past. It is something which I work with all the time with teenagers. I deal with couples. But the real reason I'm delighted to be here is because last year I got a call from Chani Morozov, who talked to me about M.U.S.T. And I have to be honest, I will tell you that I thought she was crazy. A woman calling me, telling me that they're going to start this program in Lubavitcher schools and started convincing parents to not give their children smartphones. And I thought, this is crazy, this is not gonna happen. I wish it would happen. A year later, I sat today with Chani Morozov, with other founders of M.U.S.T, and I was so impressed. I was so impressed. This is not a fly-by-night operation. These are not people who want to take away your children's smartphones. These are people who are committed to improve our lives, your lives and your family's lives. This is a real mission. These are people who are serious about it, want to do it in a realistic way, and want to see that our community is improved. And I am honored to be here for them to talk about this issue. This is truly a cause, a wonderful cause, which they are taking up. All the people involved, I mentioned one person's name, I can't remember everybody else who was there, but I will tell you, each one of them is dedicated, serious, and realistic about this issue. And that's wonderful, Yasher Koyach. I hope this program continues to grow here in Crown Heights, and it can be also expanded to other Lubavitcher communities and other places because it is so vital. The other reason I'm delighted to be here is it's raining outside, it's cold. COVID, Omicron, which is the newest update, is around. And nevertheless, this room has a lot of people in it. I see there's a lot of empty chairs, but don't be fooled. There are people who are listening to this online. I gave a similar speech in Oleteria about a few years ago, and I will tell you that that conversation, that talk reverberates today online. People have seen it, I've passed it on. There may be, seats are not full, but the idea of having this program so we can talk directly to mothers who will make a difference in their families and to our communities is amazing. I am honored to be here tonight for that reason. And thank you to all of you who made it out here. There's a lot of other things you could have done. This tells me that you are truly committed about the chinuch of your children. So I am here, and I'm here to bust a few myths. I'm going to start with that. What are the myths? First of all, that the internet or the media and media addiction, what I will call it, I can't tell you for sure if it's addiction or not an addiction or what it is, but I will tell you that it definitely looks like one. This media addiction is not a problem just for teens. And we are not going to solve this problem if we think we're trying to stop our children from becoming addicted to the media or for overusing media. This is not a problem which we are going to tell our children how to deal with. This is a problem which we all have. We are all struggling with addiction. We are teaching our children, and our children are watching us, and they are following us. That's issue number one, which I'm going to talk about. Number two, this is a problem just for Lubavitchers or just a problem for us. It's not true. This is a problem for everybody, as you saw online. There we saw a design ethicist or an ethicist for Google who spoke about the dangers of the internet. But there are some people, there's a fellow called Justin Rosenstein. Justin Rosenstein is one of the engineers who developed Facebook. He developed, if I'm right, he developed the like button on Facebook. And that is one of the most attractive features of Facebook, to be able to like. And what he did was he made the computer, he made these social media programs interactive, and we'll talk about that also, how that is so powerful. Justin Rosenstein regretted what he had done, and he recognized that he was responsible for addicting so many people to the internet, and he has said he would not give his child a smartphone. He's not the only one. There are many CEOs in Silicon Valley who will not give their children smartphones because they know a very important truth. They know that they are paying designers, engineering designers, to specifically addict you and your children to the smartphone. When we tell a child not to use a smartphone or to control themselves, it is very unrealistic. And the reason why it's very unrealistic is because these things, these smartphones, are designed to be addictive, to make us dependent on them. Think about it. The size, the shape, everything about them. The technology is designed to bring us back again and again. It is just not realistic for us to turn to our children and say, get off your phone. You can't ask a child to do that. This is not a problem just for our children, it's a problem for us. It's not only a problem for us, it is a problem for non-Lubavitchers. I live in a non-Jewish, non-Lubavitch community. I see many clients, they're all struggling with the same thing, with internet addiction. Just to share with you a little story, in a non-Lubavitcher school, a principal called me up because a 6-year-old walked into school one day, pre-K, what are 6-year-olds? Pre-K, the kindergarten? This was a little boy, and a little boy turned to a little girl and asked her to do something which was absolutely disgusting. 6-year-old boy. The principal was shocked. The teacher was shocked. Where had this kid learned this? Guess where? He had seen it on his parents' smartphone, and he brought it into school. I feel bad for that little girl who was traumatized and for that little boy who was traumatized. These are the kind of things which are happening all the time, all over the place. My practice right now, I would say, is about 50-50. 50% of the time, I'm working with Fruma people, people from our community, Lubavitch community, people all over the world. On a regular day, I will be Zooming with somebody from Russia, maybe the Ukraine, Israel, England, France, different places, Argentina, talking to people, especially shluchim around the country. And a lot of the time, the issues I'm dealing with ultimately lies at the feet of smartphone use, overuse. So this is a problem affecting everybody. I have ministers who are coming to me because they've heard of my area of work, which I do, and they are addicted to the internet. By the way, people in positions of leadership, and we'll talk about that, tend to specifically fall into this problem more than others because of loneliness and things like that, which we'll talk about. So this is not a problem just for us. It is a problem, as you saw online. Everybody is struggling with it. I think the smartphone became ubiquitous. It became all available over the place around the middle of the 1980s. And it has been with us since then, and we do not know how to address this problem properly. And it's nice to see that people are willing to fight back on this issue. So it's not just our problem, it's a problem for everybody. It used to be thought, when I started working, I spoke in Olei Torah, And I spoke in solitary because I thought this was a problem just for the boys, because we were talking about a specific use of the internet, specific use of smartphones, which boys were having problems with. They naturally tend to look at inappropriate things, etc. That's a myth. Today, I find it's a problem with girls and boys and adult men and adult women all over the place. Everybody's struggling with it, and everybody's struggling in similar ways. It is true. Boys tend to fall into inappropriate places with the internet, and they tend to use the smartphone to get themselves into trouble in one way. And girls tend to use it for social media, and that causes them a lot of devastation. But I spoke to a girl, a Lubavitcher girl from a Lubavitcher school not here in Crown Heights, who told me, interestingly, just a couple of weeks ago, that in her class, this is a 16-year-old girl, she told me it's a flex that the girls in her class have been watching porn. I don't know if you know what those words mean. It's a flex. That's a word I never knew before. She said, a flex, I found out when I asked her, what does that mean? And she said, a flex, it's a sign of pride, like flexing your muscles. So I learned a new word, but I also learned a new horrible fact, that girls too are using it for social media and for other things too. This is having devastating impact on our communities. It's having devastating impact on our children, on our culture altogether, and I will talk about that too. Like I said, this is not a conversation just about schmutz. This is not a conversation about inappropriate places. This is a conversation about the smartphone in general. Yes, that's part of the problem, a big part of the problem, and it's very big part of the problem, but it's not the only part of the problem. There are other parts too. Social media in itself is devastating, the impact it has. You saw on the video, the studies which have been done. When I started to talk about this years ago, maybe there was 1 or 2 studies. I get every day, I get something called a Science Daily. That's an email. Yes, on my smartphone, I do. And on there, I get all the updated studies which have been done, which are in the reputable magazines, and summaries of them. Every month, there is another study done about the negative impacts of the media. This is a problem which we need to address, and it's very big. Finally, it won't happen to me. That's something I hear over and over again. Those of you who didn't come here tonight, those of you who think this is not a problem for you, you are absolutely wrong. I will tell you this, that there was an informal study done by one of the mashpiyim here in Crown Heights, and he said that over 90% of the boys in his class, we're talking about 13, 14-year-olds, had been exposed to inappropriate material on the internet. That's 90%. That means if you have 2 children at home, each one of you here has a son who's been exposed and has been watching and has acknowledged to their mashpia that this is a problem for them. And by the way, when I look at a boy or a girl in my office and I talk to them and they're being sent to me either because they're apathetic, they're depressed, or because they're having a problem with shidduchim, or for whatever other reason it is, or they're married and their relationship is on the rocks, I will tell you, 90% of the time, when I dig down a little deeper, I find one of the culprits. And one of the strongest culprits is technology. Technology is interfering. So, it is happening to you. Not it will happen to you, it is already happening to you. The problem already exists in your house. If you've got more than 2 children, you probably have somewhat of that problem in your house already. So that's another one of the myths. It won't happen to you. The next myth is, I can't do anything about it. I want you to know that I actually started to believe that. Like the previous speaker said, like throwing that starfish back into the water. It is very true. We can do something about it. And that is why I am honored and I'm overjoyed to be here to see that mothers are going to make a difference. And I got to tell you something. When mothers take on a job, it gets done. That is something I see in my own house, and I see it in society. Don't wait for us, because we're not going to make it happen. You are the ones who are going to make it happen, and it is going to happen because you care and you know your children. So, where does it start? It all starts with relationships. Human beings, by definition, need relationship. It is a fundamental necessity of all living beings to be connected. It is so important that it is just as important as eating and drinking. This is a talk which I gave in Alitalia, and I'm giving it over again today, a little bit different, but it's basically the same conversation. But I want to tell you, connection, the ability to connect, the need to connect, is so fundamental that every human being needs it. Not only every human being, every living thing needs connection. There was a fellow called Dr. Bowlby, a famous psychology researcher. And what he found out was that the famous, everybody's heard of Sigmund Freud, he found out that Sigmund Freud was wrong about something. Sigmund Freud said that people are attached to their mother because the mother is the source of their sustenance. Children nurse from their mother, and that's why they connect, and that's how they learn connection. And he practiced, and he did some amazing experiments on rhesus monkeys. And what he found out was that it's not the person who provides food which they connect to. It's something warm, and they connect to warmth, they connect to something which connects back to them. And what he came to the conclusion was that connection for living things is just as important as food. We all want to connect, and here lies the problem. Today, in our day and age, it is very hard for us to connect with one another. So it's interesting that today we have the technology to communicate in a way which is easier and easier than it has ever been. But this communication success has actually caused that we are less and less connected. We are not connected with one another in a real and a substantial way. Children are looking for connection. They're looking to connect with their parents. They're looking to be relevant. They want to share. They want to learn. They want to feel important. They want to feel relevant. When that doesn't exist, they connect to a smartphone, because a smartphone will become their best friend. It is their best friend. Think about what a friend is. A friend is somebody who will be there for you whenever you need them. A friend is somebody who will compliment you and do what you want it to do. And that is what the smartphone does for them. Let me ask you a question. If you had, do I sound that bad? Thank you very much. Let me ask you a question. If you give a child a smartphone at 3 years old, why will that child want to develop communication skills? Why should they? They're not going to develop communication skills because they're getting everything they need. They're communicating. They're getting what they want. It's being the phone is responding to them. It's giving everything they want. Not only that, but it gives it to them immediately. They play a game. Good job, stars. The phone is complimenting them better than anybody in real life. And that's why they love it. By the way, I'm addicted to games on the phone. Why? Because every time I reach a goal, I feel good. I'm on level 51 or whatever it is. I'm really excited. I'm feeling really intelligent because I'm playing a dumb game on my phone. But that's the way it is. Your children, our grandchildren are being exposed to this. And what is happening? they are getting artificial social reinforcement. There is no real relationship which can give them the kind of reinforcement they are getting on their phone in a superficial way. Now, when I say that, what I mean is they have to work on it. And if they don't have to work on it, they're not going to. That is what's happening to our children today. They are having these devices in their pockets. They're exposed to these devices on a constant basis. No wonder there's social anxiety. No wonder relationships are so difficult. Now, I know that today there's a lot of people who are using the phone, including me, to actually communicate and to actually connect. I use Zoom 8 hours a day, unfortunately, sometimes 9 hours a day, to talk to people. I talk to cousins. Used to talk to my father, Olav Shalom, my mother, Olav Shalom, in Eretz Yisrael. I would get onto Zoom, WhatsApp. I'd be able to talk to her. These are all great, but the fact of the matter is, these are good, but when they replace human connection, they become a problem. So that's the first issue, connection. This becomes our children's best friends. And once they have that, they don't want to communicate. How often have I heard stories about one girl who's on a date and she says to me, actually this story was with a guy says to me that at his, in the yichud room, his wife pulled out a smartphone and took a picture of both of them and posted it online. He was devastated. And she said, "What's the problem? I'm just sharing it with my friends." And she didn't even understand what was wrong with that. The yichud room, the time when a couple have a chance to symbolically show the privacy of their union, that here they are together. Everybody is seeing them in a private room where they are sitting alone. And the girl pulls out her phone to take a picture to share it with her best friends, while her best friend is sitting there right in the room and she's overlooking him. And she didn't see anything wrong with it. This is an example. Or a boy who's on a date and he pulls out his phone because he's getting bored and he's looking at information on his phone. We've lost the ability to communicate because we have become so dependent on the smartphone for communication and for connection. I want to talk to you about a drug called oxytocin. Has anybody heard of oxytocin? Oxytocin is known as the cuddle drug. What is that? That is a hormone which is created in the brain and it is released during intimacy. Not only during intimacy, but it's also released when a mother nurses with her child. You may think you love your baby and you're attached to your baby because you love that child, but love actually boils down to a drug called oxytocin. Oxytocin actually causes you to bond whenever you have this drug in your system. When a mother nurses a baby, the oxytocin, which flows through her blood and passes on to a child, creates the bond between her and between the baby. When a husband and wife are together, the oxytocin is what creates that bond. But we also know something else about oxytocin. One of the scientists who did research on oxytocin found out, did an experiment. He was trying to see how oxytocin works. It does not cause sexual arousal. It causes cuddling. It causes friendship and connection. That's what it does. But it also does something else. What he found was when he gave oxytocin to mice who he had raised since they were babies, they would start to cuddle together. And they would cuddle together until oxytocin wore off. But he also saw something else. That when he gave oxytocin to these mice, if he tried to put his hand into the cage and take out one of those mice and separate them, they would become extremely aggressive against him. And think about it. That makes sense. That's the definition of love. I mean, we've all heard of the mother bear who will do anything to defend her children. That is exactly it. Because oxytocin, the same drug, the same nature, the same character, which causes us to bond with things, causes us to fight to the death against anything which will get in our way. Now you can understand why your children react the way they do when you take away their phone with them. You want to know if your son or if your daughter is addicted to her phone? Here's the answer. Watch what happens when you take it away. She doesn't say, "No, Ma, please give it back." They go crazy. They go ballistic. So where did this come from? Why are they reacting like this? And the answer is because they are physiologically, not psychologically, they are physiologically attached to that phone. And this is the sad thing. They are attached exactly the way a husband and wife are attached to each other. By the time they are ready to get married, they are not capable of getting married because they are already married. They are already attached. They are already in a relationship. And they have to give up that relationship for the relationship they have to make, and that's hard. And that's why weeks, months, years after, I am trying to put those pieces together, trying to work with couples to show them, you guys are not married. You guys had a ceremony. You guys get along. You guys play house. You guys are physically intimate with each other, but you don't really have a relationship. And they say, of course we have a relationship. Of course we do. But they really don't. Yes, they talk to each other. They share time with each other, but they don't get that feeling of safety, that feeling of comfort. When there's frustration, they hide in the bathroom on the phone, or they hide in the bed on the phone. Why should they work out their differences? Why should they struggle? Why should they compromise when they can go their different ways, get on their phones, and deal with the problems that way? They have not learned since childhood how to negotiate a conversation, how to deal with stress, how to deal with emotional self-control, how to deal with delayed gratification. All of these things are absent from them. By the way, becoming connected to your phone and boys who become attached to their phones, let's not talk about what that does in terms of their imagination when they end up getting married, the images which are flying around in their minds and what they see and what they want and what they think is realistic, whether it's what a woman should look like or what somebody should do or how they should behave in the bedroom, what's pleasurable, what feels good, etc. These are things which they've already seen, and they come into the marriage expecting these things. This is not a joke. This is not, I'm not talking about one or two guys. I'm talking about an epidemic. And it's the same thing with girls. Girls are watching movies, they're watching shows, they're watching other things online, and they're seeing what a relationship looks like in Hollywood because they watch these shows, and they expect the same thing to happen in their lives. They're going to be ran after, they're going to be taken care of, whatever it is, whatever situation it is. And they find out that's not what a relationship is. A relationship is hard work, and they don't know how to do it. Another big issue, what I have found with adults, is that adults who come to the conclusion that I need to get off my smartphone, this is a problem, but they have nothing else, because the smartphone has been the only thing which has entertained them and given them satisfaction. So besides for the fact that what is wrong about a smartphone, the exposure, the influence which it gives them, they have not developed any other things. Do you know that children today spend less time outdoors than prisoners in a maximum security prison? This is the research which has recently been shown. Riding a bike? Why? Why would you want to ride a bike? What are you going to see? Trees? People? Why would I want to do that? Traffic? I don't want to do that. Now, some kids still do that. And if we give kids a choice, the kids will always take the choice which is more fun. And that's why we can't give these kids a choice. Because it is not up to them. It is a myth to believe that children will make the right choice. This is an addiction. This is something, let me take back that word addiction, because I don't want to, this is something which is so powerful that you cannot give the kids the choice, choose between this and that. We have to set boundaries. Now, is a smartphone a terrible thing? No. It has beautiful things about it. They're beautiful things, but it has to be done in a proper way, in a way which is responsible. And we, as parents setting the guidelines, we cannot expect them to set the guidelines. They won't do it. I can't do it. I cannot control where I go on my smartphone. And that's why I have a filter. What I learned was that if I leave it up to willpower alone, it will not happen. Willpower will not help us to overcome an addiction. The Alter Rebbe says that in Tanya. Those are not my words. The Alter Rebbe says very clearly that a Rasha libom b'shusam. Now, your children are not Rishoim, and I hope I'm not a Rasha. But what it means is, he says, once you've gotten used to a certain behavior, it is not up to you. You will have lost your bechira. You've lost your free choice to stop that activity. As the Rambam says, when a person reaches that level, when he's lost his bechira, he still has choice. He still has a choice left. The choice is not whether to go onto the smartphone or whether to drink or not to drink. That is not something they have a choice anymore. The choice they have is to get help, to use resources around them to put a barrier between them and the problem. Because if we're going to leave it up to our children not to go to inappropriate places, that's not going to happen. We need to set boundaries. This is not easy, but I will tell you something. What I found with parents today is there is a phrase which goes around which is very true, but also devastating. And you're going to hear it here first. Unconditional love. Now, I know Avi Fishoff, and some of you know him, talks about unconditional love, and he's doing great work, and I'm not here to argue with him. What he does is wonderful. But I will tell you that the way people understand unconditional love today is absolutely wrong. Because a person needs to have unconditional love, that's just one side. That's Yad Yamin. But there's also Yad Shmoel. There's a left hand. We need to provide discipline. When I mean discipline, in the old days, that may have been a stick, it may have been punishments and things like that. But discipline is also expectations. Discipline is boundaries. Things we tell our children you can't do. This is something we need to be able to do. We need to give our children guidelines, what is right and what is wrong. This is something we need to do. If we don't do that, our children will not learn it. As I was telling you before, boys are struggling with this, girls are struggling with this, adults are struggling with this. All over the place, people are struggling with this. This is the problem. We're looking for connection. How do we resolve this? Well, there are two things. Connection is one of them, and the other one is mastery. Our children want to feel competent. We want to feel competent. And what we do is we learn something, we become good at it. Maybe it's mothering, maybe it's cooking, maybe it's teaching, maybe it's lawyering, maybe it's being a therapist, maybe it's being an engineer. I don't know what it is, but we all want to feel good about something. When children don't feel good about themselves, number one, they can distract from any significant emotional pain by going to the smartphone. And what they can also do is they can feel competent because if they're playing a game or if they're talking with someone or something like that, they can feel competent. The other side of that is exactly the opposite. Children have such a strong need for connection, they run to these social media apps. And what they're getting, yes, partially is connection, but a big part of it is artificial connection. They go when they want to, they get off when they want to, they post what they want, they look for what they want, And that's what happens. So what they've got is an artificial relationship. In some situations, it is the best thing for kids. Kids who are socially shy have innate problems. Yes, using a computer, using a smartphone. I work with kids who've got Asperger's. Smartphone is excellent for Asperger's because it deletes the emotional content of a conversation, which overwhelms some of these children. And when the teacher talks to a child with a smartphone and the child speaks back to the teacher, the communication is wonderful. But our children don't have Asperger's. That's a big part which is missing and sometimes overplayed. How many children do you know who've been devastated by a rejection from a media app? It's even unrealistic. An unreal relationship, an unreal disconnection, an unreal rejection, devastating them. This is what we're exposing our children to. We can make a difference. We can change this. So how do we change this? First of all, there are apps out there today which we can put on our children's phones, and like you heard earlier, there are things we can do. We can use technology to fight technology. There are apps which control content, and there are apps which control time on the phones. If you give your child a smartphone, set some guidelines. Now, they will tell you, I'm going to use my friend's smartphone, or whatever it is. If your child is under 13 or 14, don't let that worry you. It doesn't matter. Yes, it's true. They may go elsewhere to see or to watch, do whatever they want. That doesn't stop you from your responsibility for setting some guidelines. When you set guidelines, this is not something which you're setting the guidelines for them. You are setting the guidelines for everybody in the family. When my son asks me, why does he need a filter on the phone? Don't you trust me? Which is a line I hear from all the kids and from all the teenagers who I work with. And I say to them, it's not that I don't trust you. I don't trust myself. This is a problem I have, and I don't think you're any different than I am. This is going to help you out. It's a very real conversation about the internet, about media, and how dangerous it is, and how captivating it is, and we need to do it. Set guidelines at home. If you are giving your child a smartphone, make a time when smartphones, don't take them to your room, don't take them into the bedroom, leave them in a public place, or have them turn them off, or have software which turns it off at 9 o'clock. We know, and I know this from experience, that it takes about 35 minutes for your brain to slow down from watching a screen. Here's what people do not realize about it. Just watching a screen, you can be watching a relaxing screen of goldfish going by, or clouds going by on your screen, and what you don't know is that it is triggering your brain, and your brain is firing excessively, much more than when you're just reading a book. And the reason for that is because your screen is refreshing very, very quickly, multiple times a second. Now, your conscious brain doesn't see it because your conscious brain is trying to make sense of what's on the screen, not what's happening behind the screen or the refresh rate. But your brain actually sees that. The neurons in your brain are actually responding to that, and they are firing. And that's why you're stimulated. You turn off the phone, I turn off the phone, and I cannot sleep. It might take 30 minutes, 45 minutes. You can't fall asleep. Our children don't fall asleep. That's why you want to make sure, don't take the smartphone to bed. You will not be able to sleep with it. And if you're able to sleep now, good for you. But it's very hard in our children. Another issue I have noticed is, when I was growing up, Chil Shabbos, that was a line in the sand. That was the difference between being frum and being unreligious. Today, it's not the case because our kids have smartphones. I've seen Hasidic boys, Hasidic girls, who, somebody said it to me today, it's called keeping half Shabbos. This is something which you may not be familiar with, but it's going on. I hear it all the time. I hear it from boys and girls, and it's one of the questions I ask about using the smartphone. I say, and how often do you use it? And Do you have difficulty? I don't say, are you using it on Shabbos? I say, do you have difficulty? How often do you use it on Shabbos? No, just once or twice. Just as easy as that. People are saying it because it's just absolutely too addictive. And it's not their fault. I don't expect them to have the self-control. Now, is everybody having that problem? No. Are some of our children have that problem? Yes. And that problem is growing. When we teach our children healthy ways to use a smartphone, they will grow up and they'll be wiser. Will it solve the problem? No. I've seen adults who have had no exposure to smartphones as a kid get addicted later on in life. But there's nothing we can do about that. Every day, every week that we hold back these things from our children, we are saving them. We are helping them. We are helping them learn the skills. Somebody said, once you give a child a smartphone, you can't take it back. And there's some truth to that. But I'll tell you something else. Once your child sees things on their smartphone, they can never erase that image. I cannot cure somebody with an internet addiction. I cannot cure somebody who's been watching pornography on the smartphone. What I can do is I can manage it, and I can help them battle it and recognize that this is something which they're going to live with for the rest of their life, having these images in the back of the head. For some, it's an attractive thing which is driving them. For others, it's a trauma. Seeing these things which they shouldn't see, is traumatic. And our young kids, I work a lot with boys, are seeing this thing. And this is what's fueling the boys who are dropping out from yeshiva. Because when a boy sees these things, or is just exposed to movies or whatever else it is, how do we expect him to sit in class for an hour, for 2 hours, and to be interested in learning when he's watched cool movies and he's watched other things on his smartphone or even on his, on his electronic device the kids are now downloading, even on other devices. We can't compete. Teachers cannot compete with this stuff. There's no way the educational system can compete with this kind of stimulation. And that's why we need to set good examples for our children. There is hope. Communicate with your children. Talk to your children. Ultimately, our kids are going to these things because they're looking for connection and for mastery. So how do we fight it? Work on connection. Work on connecting with your children. Work with your children, helping them feel that they are masterful, that they are competent. By the way, am I running too long? Okay. So how do we do that? Sit with your children at supper. Talk to them. Now, I was talking to somebody today with 15, 16 children, and she was talking about how she sits with each of her children. I have 4, and I was talking to this woman. I was thinking I was talking to a malach. But it's amazing. The children don't have smartphones, and she's making it work. This is amazing. Now, child is 18, you can't stop them, that's true. But up until then, connect. Our children don't know what connection is. Our children don't even know what they are missing. How do we do that? You sit with them, spend time. Go to your child's school once every 6 months and say to the teacher, prearrange it, of course, take it, let's go out for lunch. Take an hour or two, spend with your child. If you can't spend an hour or two with your child because you're a hardworking person, make some time to make your child feel special. Have them bake with you, have them cook with you, have them do something with you. Talk to them, ask them questions. It's not easy because we ourselves do not know how to do that. Look at that. I apologize for that. Let me turn this off. A desperate client. Turned off. I thought I turned it off earlier. Connect with your children. Speak to them. Connect with your spouses. Make time, supper time. Turn off your devices. Sit with your children. If you can, do it with your husband. If you can't do it with your husband, do it alone. If you can't do it with all the children, do it with the children who are available. Make supper time a time when you talk together. Teach them how to talk. Ask people who are successful, who have done it. Talk to them. Ask them, how do they do it? How does it work? How do they reinforce it? If you have to give incentives, give incentives. There's a Rosh Yeshiva, Nadav Lubavitch Yeshiva, in Minneapolis, who pays $700 to kids. He says to them, if you will commit not to have a smartphone, but you promise me that you will not go out and buy your own, I am going to give you $700. And he gives them $700. That's how much a smartphone costs. This is what he does to keep kids. And I say to him, is it worth it? It's just for a year to pay $700. And he says, it's another year saving these kids' lives. And he's right. Make a trip with these kids. Say, take away the smartphone, we'll go to Eretz Yisrael. We'll do something like that. Whatever it takes, just to get that smartphone out of the hands. If you can't do that, then set some other guidelines. Decide what's realistic. I'm not saying that everybody has to spend $700 to take the smartphone away. My point is just, it's okay to use incentives. This is a very big thing. Do what you can, it's important. The other thing is mastery. Our children need mastery. They need to feel competent and capable of doing things. When your children don't feel competent about something, whether it's socially, whether it's academically, or something like that, that's when they start to run to a smartphone. Number one, to feel masterful, like it is playing a game, or it is about relationships. Give them something which they can feel masterful about. If it's music, if it's sports, if it's art, whatever it is, if it's exercise, dance, whatever it takes. Remember, some people will say to me, that's not appropriate. Dance, exercise, why would I do that with my child? Well, the answer is, I agree. Some of those things may not be. But ask yourself, which one is worse? And sometimes we've got to think that way when it comes to these things. Our children need time to rest. They need to do productive things, and we can give it to them. So keep that in mind. These are things we can do positively, rebuilding our connection, giving our children a sense of mastery, teaching them things. Of course, they're going to say no in the beginning. But over time, if we work on it, they will start to do it. Figure out, ask people. Kids maybe who like to ride a bike, they can set a goal to ride 120 miles or something like that, pay and give them a reward for it. Art, we need to have talent contests and things like that where children are learning and feeling good that they can excel, or they can do well, not only in academics and not only in social situations, but in other situations too. You know, B'Hashgacha Pratis, tonight is Chavdala Teves, which is the Alter Rebbe's yahrzeit. And I want to share a word from the Alter Rebbe, which I think is very important. The Alter Rebbe says that in Ikvus de Mashiach, in the times of the Mashiach, he says we have two goals. One goal is mitzvah saseh, and the other goal is mitzvah lo saseh. And he explains, when a person does a mitzvah saseh, he does a positive commandment, what he is doing is, he's showing that there is HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the world. He's showing that there is a God when we do mitzvah saseh. Baruch Hashem. We live in a generation where everybody is comfortable doing mitzvahs, doing mitzvah saseh, eating kosher, it's available. The Torah, there's learning available. Everything is available to do the mitzvahs as beautiful as you want. But the Alter Rebbe says, the next challenge is mitzvahs lo saseh. Lo saseh means looking at something which you want to do and saying no, challenge. This is the ultimate commitment. The ultimate commitment in every relationship is when you say no to somebody else to be able to show how valuable the person in front of you is. When I hang up the phone with a client and I say to my wife, I am here for you, that's when she knows how valuable she really is. When we hang up the phones and we're present for our children, we are now struggling with this lo saseh, because lo saseh means not saying that there is Hashem in the world, but saying that the world has no power over me. In the language of Hasidus, as eine Stockenwelt, there's no world, meaning the world doesn't have any power. This is the ultimate goal we have, is the mitzvahs lo yisaseh, to show not that there's a God in the world, but the world doesn't have its power over me. And the Alter Rebbe says something even more interesting. He says, even if we have this fight every day of our life, and every moment of our life, every moment which we succeed, even if we fail, he says, Ein yokar kazu, I'm not quoting exactly, but he says, this is yokar mikol yokar, this is the most precious thing to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, even a 5-minute delay in self-gratification. May HaKadosh Baruch Hu bench us that this work of M.U.S.T, and this goal of getting our children, delaying our children from technology and keeping them away from technology, whether it's a day, whether it's a year, and hopefully will come a time when our children, as long as they're in school, will not be using smartphones. I know that's an impossibility right now. I don't see it happening. But I have faith in you, and I know that people who really want to make it happen will make it happen. If not for everybody, just increase it as much as we can. This is an amazing goal. Thank you very much.
I feel like we need some time to digest, but we have to move on. Thank you so much. For me, 2 points. I always try to think of 2 points: connection, 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 like location, location, location. And the fact that every moment, that really speaks to me because it seems so insurmountable. But if it's just that one moment, I can do that one little moment. That I can do. Simi Polanski-Hoffman co-founded the Frank New York with her sister, and they not only created a brand and a company, but a very vibrant online community. And for her to take a look at that and saying, is this serving me? And make some very hard choices, and to come and share that with us is extremely brave and courageous, and I'm really curious to hear about your journey through this. Thank you.
Oh, hi. I am so sorry. I just had to send a really important message. I had to send it. My daughter needs something from Amazon for school for tomorrow. I found an amazing vacation place. Don't worry, I saved it. And I found the most amazing meditation meme that I just want to read to you guys. It's so meaningful. I forgot to send the message. I totally forgot to send the messages. Do you mind to wait 1 second? I'm so sorry. Wow. That is where I am most of the time, everywhere and nowhere, all at once. I've always wondered why Hashem chose to infuse his breath into Adam to give him life. Why didn't Hashem jumpstart his heart and give him a pulse? Why didn't Hashem infuse him with blood with a transfusion? Why was it breath that gave man life? I'd like to invite everyone in this room to take a moment to pause with me. I'm really not here, and I'd like to be, so I'm going to take a deep breath before I continue. Feel free to close your eyes. I'm going to do that again. A few weeks ago, I got a call from Simcha Minkowitz. She said to me, Simi, there is a huge problem in Crown Heights. Our teenagers and our children are suffering. We can't see it. It's invisible, but they're really struggling. We know we can't get rid of the problem, but we're really trying to do tiny things to make a real, legitimate shift. We're doing our best to try and help them. Will you speak at our next event? Wait, in my mind I said, Simcha, are you sure you have the right number? There is a mental health crisis in our schools, and I was about to give a speech. So I did what any diligent person would do when they're about to give a speech on a topic they know nothing about. I rolled up my sleeves and I commenced my research. The first thing I did was look online. I typed in smartphone effect on youth mental health. And the first summary that came up, those first few lines that seemed to be Google's definition of what you're looking for, gave me this. Results: depression, anxiety, OCD, ADHD, and alcohol use disorder. Excessive smartphone use is associated with difficulties in cognitive emotion regulation, impulsivity, impaired cognitive function, addiction to social networking, shyness, and low self-esteem. That was just the beginning. I reached out to parents who have teenagers that are struggling with emotional and mental health, who are afraid of how the smartphone will continue to harm their children because they have seen the harm that the smartphone has already done. Taking it away is almost impossible. Who shared that it did not start that way. It was just relaxation, a release, a reward, just like everybody else's kids, until it wasn't. I read evidence that found that when young people use social media, it affects their sense of self. Those that spend time on social apps were more likely to feel envious of others and worse about themselves in a very real way. And studies that report a more negative mood just after 10 minutes of browsing on Instagram and Facebook. The studies were endless, the statistics were infinite, and quite frankly, I could not fathom what I was reading. I had no idea about how I was going to write this speech. But I sat down anyway, and I attempted to gather and make sense of all the information I was reading and hearing. And to be honest, I was completely and utterly overwhelmed. And then it hit me. I am the research. I wasn't asked to speak tonight because I have a PhD. I wasn't asked to share the latest data from Psychology Today. I wasn't asked to compile and prepare a report. I am the research. I am the adult version of that young girl who just doesn't feel good after they don't get enough likes on Instagram, who doubts myself because it feels like those likes did too. I am the adult who instinctively grabs my phone the moment my kids go to sleep because God forbid I should be bored, unstimulated, or just sit with my thoughts for even 1 minute. And don't worry, I have checked it during bedtime too, maybe to escape. I am the woman who finds it impossible to just put it away. So I closed up all the research I had found, just like that. Because my practice of waking up and going to sleep, so dependent and deeply connected to this thing, is really the only research that I can speak of. It's really the only research that I can share from my heart, and probably because my story is so similar to so many others. I have no desire to stand up here tonight and preach about just how bad smartphones are for our children, to tell you that our kids are far better off without them, and to submit, probably in agreement with most of you, that it feels somewhat inevitable. If for no one else, this speech is just for me, and hopefully for my children. My 10-year-old has been asking for a phone for the last 3 years, and the first time when she broached the subject, I instinctively just blurted out 16. 16 is the golden year in my house. Pool, dog, smartphone. 16 is going to be a great year. Everyone is invited. I wish I would have said 18. Although for me, tonight is not about banishing technology, getting rid of the problem, or hiding my daughter in a room till I feel like she can safely maneuver the internet. I still struggle to safely maneuver the internet, to set boundaries, limits, filter what I see and read, what floods my feed. For me, tonight is about learning a new language so the evils of social media don't become the only one. It's about understanding that a lot of the emotional and mental health challenges are exacerbated by social media. It's about knowing that teenagers, young teenagers in our high schools that are cutting themselves, those who struggle with eating disorders, are flooded and supported with the same content the algorithm continues to feed them. It's about knowing that online bullying is real and happens to our children in 5th grade. Tonight is about giving ourselves tools so we can help our children have access and practice with safety and intention. It's about learning that even though as parents there is a certain level of surrendering that we have to do, we still can model choices. Why do I think I can successfully limit my child's usage when they have no concept of me limiting mine? What am I doing that shows I am sensitive about how I use my time? Aside from Shabbos, do I have times and spaces that are technology-free? If I can successfully spend more time off my phone and devote that time into building a relationship with my daughter, when she does see something scary or inappropriate or confusing on social media, I'm the one that she comes to. Tonight is about delaying as much as possible. It's about coming together to support each other, making shifts while we navigate this really confusing and difficult topic. It's been just over a month now since my sister and Chaya made a really big decision to pull back from social media, to take a step back from our platform, The Frock. From the moment Shabbos came out to the moment Shabbos came in, I was here. There were so many reasons that eventually snowballed us into making this decision, and ultimately, now it's been a month, it has been one of the hardest and best decisions I have ever made in my entire life. For the last decade, together with Chaya, we created and built a successful brand and social media platform. Thank you. Like everybody else, we ran in the hustle culture race. We juggled being a wife, a mother, and a CEO. There were so many times you saw us, we felt like queens of social media, and other times we just felt like we were drowning. But they balanced each other out. So we kept on hustling and it kept on feeding us until it became too much. I spent the last 2 years behind social media, feeling like I couldn't cope. And yet every single day I showed up and no one had a clue. Chaya and I knew that if we were to ever fill this space again in the way that we love and want to, we needed to take a step back and unlearn things that we were getting wrong about it. The dependency on it, the fear of not being on it, the feelings of less than, the constant pressure to show up. We were finally able to distinguish what was actually harmful. Because there really was, and still is, so much good. The community, the connections, the people we met, the shared stories, each of them real. They're all real, and they all changed my life for the better. 4 years ago, when my late husband Shua passed away, social media is what galvanized a community to come together and raise tzedakah for my family. Social media became a platform where I could really wear my grief on my sleeve If not for social media, I would not be here in the way that I am today. Unfortunately, though, the power struggle is not an even playing field. Children and teenagers are not able to outweigh the good of social media versus the bad. It took Chaya and I, mature, grown adults, who can control what we see, who can make cognitive choices, 2 years to pull away from our phones. When you're a teenager, you actually cannot do it. The phone doesn't leave room for feelings, for a sense of self. It becomes an escape. The phone becomes a crutch to deal with our emotional hurt, so we can hide behind it, pull it out when we're stressed. How are we supposed to pull back? How are our children supposed to pull back, set limits, dismiss what's not healthy when it is so hard for us? The first time I sat down to write this speech, and still now, the irony of it is uncanny and also really deeply sentimental. Not because I was the research or am, but because me being the research is ongoing. 8 years ago, my late husband Shua began writing his thesis for his PhD, which I received 4 years ago on his behalf. The topic of his dissertation was the impact of smartphone use on relationship satisfaction. As I read through his paper, it was very confronting to read that the findings and numbers have become exponentially worse. Have we considered that our phone usage is a huge contributing factor to the disconnect we feel with our spouse? A dear friend, mentor, and teacher, Yocheved Saidoff, taught me, we don't inherit the burdens of a life left unlived, only the opportunities of roads still meant to be traveled. That is my honor tonight. On my final research stint, I reached out to Rabbi Remy Garari, Yocheved's father. It was Yocheved's yahrzeit a few weeks ago. He shared with me stories and wisdom based with love and on Torah. And if you haven't yet heard his podcast or his talks, I highly recommend you listening to them, where he talks about them and shares about this topic in greater depth. As I drove home, I was so deep in thought and sadness, but one idea kept coming to the forefront of my mind. When we start using Facebook and Instagram, we sign an invisible non-compete pact. No amount of love or stability can compete with what Facebook and Instagram have to offer. They are designed to win. Does that mean we've already lost? That there's nothing that we can do about it? No. That's why we're all here. There's plenty to do. It doesn't mean it's not hard, confusing, or difficult. It means that when my daughter begs me for a smartphone, I will not cave for fear of her not having friends. I want her to have a life. It means that even though sometimes I assume or I'm lazy and tired that she can handle it, I have to remind myself that inside their brains, cognitively, they just can't. I'm so grateful to the mothers who started that technology pact in my daughter's class. You started me on this train. The guidance and support from each other is the fuel we really need to make the ride safer, stronger, and healthier for our families. The Rebbe always said that in a room full of Hasidim, it's a Farbrengen, and we know that at every Farbrengen, we end with Hachlata. My heart feels open, and it feels like everyone here is too. And this feels like it's been an epic, deep, jarring Farbrengen. I'm going to take a risk now by saying something that I have failed at for so many years. And tonight, as I rode here in the Uber, I was like, don't say it, don't do it, you can't do it. And when I read the speech to my husband, he's like, "Are you sure you're ready for that?" And I'm like, "No, I'm actually not ready for this at all, but that's why I'm doing it." I'm going to say it out loud with all of you as my witness, and I will not have Instagram to document it. So you're just going to have to trust me. Every day, for the sake of my family, for the sake of my marriage, and for the sake of my mental health, from 4 to 6 p.m., I'm going to lock my phone away. No going back. I need to do this for me, for my children. It may look very different to you. What is everyone in this room going to do tonight? Even though this speech was really just for me, maybe it can be for us. Maybe it can be for our children. I'd like to thank the women, the mothers, the masterminds, of this organization for trusting me to share of myself, for really making it clear just how serious this topic really is. With Hashem's help, the Rebbe's guidance, and your determination, we really can give ourselves and our children a better chance. Thank you.